Okay, so now I'll give myself the spotlight so you can see what's doing. I'm presuming you can all see that.
See, fine.
Looks a little out of focus.
A little focus, Dave.
Yeah, and it's a little
Yeah,
low.
it's
If you could raise
yeah.
it
I'm
up.
just gonna drop the book out from underneath of it. That's probably better. Take my
Still out of
my hay
focus.
ground book and put it. Yeah, I don't know why that is.
It's trying to pick up on your shirt, I think. Dave.
Yeah, probably. That's not going to work. Oh well, we'll see what I can do. Maybe if I can get my face out of the way, it'll focus on the fly. Okay, so this is called a Christmas Chronomet. And the first time I saw this pattern, there's a fellow that does part-time guiding in Edmonton called Mike Monteith. Have you ever met Mike, Florin? Anyway, Mike is a local guide, and he came up with this one and called it the Christmas Chronomet. And it's supposed to represent the Chronomet at that instar stage where it's going from the worm to the pupa. And that's why it's red at the back, which is the remnants, the hemoglobin from the worm. And then it's starting to form its instar for the pupa. So this particular one is tied on a Mustad CS49. The body a little short on that. So I'm gonna tie on is on a TMCO 200R, and this is a size. This one I'm going to use a size 14. And the pupa one was on a size 10. So I get the first thing I do is I put a bead on the hook, and the bead I got is these guys. They're a Chinese product from Robinson's. 36 beads for about $12, which is a pretty good price. Put that in the vise. Then I push the bead back out of the way. And I'm going to tie on with black thread, 8/0, tie right at the beginning of the fly, right behind the eye. Wrap back a little bit. Get my scissors here. Oh. And I'm going to put the gills in first. Now, there's three things you could use for gills. The first pattern I showed you on the scud hook, it used some fine antron, white antron. You can also use CDC. This is the really nice stuff from Mark Petitjean, but they're fairly pricey, and they're specifically used for a different kind of CDC fly. So I'll put that out of the way. What I managed to get was these guys, which are CDC puffs. They're just the end of the cul de canard feather. And I got them in a batch. I don't remember where precisely, but you can see it's a nice little fluffy bit of CDC. And I pulled them by the tip and a little spit to skinny them down. And I'm going to tie it on. We tie it on so that it protrudes in front of the eye just a little bit. I'm going to tie that thread right up to the eye. Tie back a little bit, and then trim off the excess. Now that, I'm going to bind down the butts. Get my whip finisher and tie off the thread. Trim it clear. Slide the bead up over the butt ends of the CDC right to the eye of the hook. Then we start the thread right behind the bead. And cover up the butts enough and enough thread in behind the bead to keep it from sliding backwards. Now you have to make sure you get the bead on the hook the right way, because the bead has a large diameter end and a small diameter end. And if you tie it with the small diameter end to the back, it'll cover over the eye of the hook. So the open diameter. So you got to make sure that the open diameter part of the bead is at the back. Then I'm going to take some fine brass wire, and this stuff I stole off an old electric motor that was, I think, came out of one of those little model race cars. And it's really fine wire. And start wire right behind the bead and wrap it on top. And then as I wrap down the wire towards the back of the fly, I'm going to try and force the wire around it so it's on the far side of the hook. Try and keep my wraps fairly close together so that I don't end up with an irregular body with piles of wraps in some places and not in others. I want to take this right down to right over the barb of the hook, where the barb of the hook used to be. Bring my thread right back up to the front again. I don't mind using a little thread to make this body a little wider. Now, the next is I've got this holographic tinsel, and this particular version is quite skinny. Again, I've acquired so many materials over the years, I have no idea where some of these came from. So I take the tinsel, the red tinsel first, tie it right behind the eye of the bead, right behind the bead, and hold it up and wrap over top of that nice and smooth all the way down the hook shank. Again, the idea here is to build a little bit of bulk in the body, because this is a fairly fine wire hook. And bring the thread back up behind the bead. And I like my little rotating hackle pliers for the next bit. We were talking about using heat shrink tubing the other day, and that's one of the nice things you can do, put a little piece of heat shrink on your rotating hackle pliers, and it helps hang on to some of these slippery materials. So I'm just going to go to make sure that that's at the very back, and then wind in, keeping it flat, in touching or just very slightly overlapping turns up the shank of the hook. Get this out of the way. And it's a lot easier to do this holding on to the tinsel with hackle pliers than it is trying to do this with your fingers. As I have found out many times, when you get to the short end of the tinsel and it slips out of your hand and completely unravels, and you've got to start all over again. So I got a nice red body all the way up behind the bead. Tie it off. I can never get my point of my scissors down here to get right tight on when it's that close behind the bead. So I stop just a hair short. Use my fingernail to push that tag end of the tinsel down. Finalize it. I'm going to bring my thread back to, I would say, about a third of the way up from the bend of the hook. And I get my green holographic tinsel. Take that off the spool if I can get it free. Nope. The little slot on the side of these spools is really fine. Trying to get it to capture the tinsel sometimes it's a pain. I do the same with the green as I did with the red. Like, tie it, you see this little curl to the tinsel, so I always tie it with the curl up. Right back up to the front with the thread. And wrap over top of the tinsel. On top, all the way down till I'm at sort of 2/3 of the way down the body. Bring the thread forward again. This time I'll use my fingers because I have a nice long piece of tinsel. And I take that right up to directly behind the bead. And do the same thing. Trim it off. My fingernail to get the tag end out of the way. Then the wire, I'll counter wrap the wire the opposite direction. And you want about 7 or 8 turns. 4, 5, 6, 7. And the 8th turn is going to get buried here. And this wire is fine enough if I can get a good purchase on it. I should be able to helicopter that out of there. Maybe not. Yep, there it goes. And the second last thing I do here is I take a single strand of peacock row and I wrap it in half around the thread, tie it down, and then I go around right behind the bead with no more than 2, at the most 3 wraps. Then right behind the bead, I tie that off. Trim it clean. Tie down the loose end. And then get my whip finisher again. And finish off with a 3 or 4 wrap whip finish right behind the bead. All the tag ends are buried behind the bead, so it's a nice clean fly. The last thing to do is to take my Sally Hansen's Extreme Wear. It used to be called Hard as Nail. Now it's called Extreme Wear lacquer. And I put a coating of that lacquer over the back of the fly. Now there's a little extra there, so I need to clean it up. What that does is that gives you an almost transparent body there with the wire being covered up. It makes for a nice segmented appearance. And that's him. So you fairly quick, if you get prepared, you can tie those by the dozen. Fairly straightforward.
Didn't we do a similar fly, Dave, with using floss and acetate?
Yes, I have
Dipped
done
in-
those. Yeah, you use an acetate floss and you tie it with the floss and then put your rib on, and then you have a little vial of acetone and you dip the fly in the acetone and it melts the floss. You just give it a quick dip and let it air dry. And it makes it quite a bit glossier than what the lacquer does. But it's the same effect. And you can do that with any colors of Chronomet. So that's the Christmas chrony.
Good.
Quick and dirty. I'll get my box out and I'll stick the completed flies in there.
So do you only fish that in December?
No. That's funny. Yeah. Actually, in the larger sizes, you'll fish them in the spring because most of these Chronomets, they start off the season bigger and then they get smaller as the summer goes on. So this is a size 14, but you can tie those Chronomets. I don't have my Chronomet box here, but you can see on that some of these ones down here, you can tie them pretty small. Because they get smaller as the season progresses.
Yeah, I've seen them tied down to 18s, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't go smaller than 18s.
Yeah.
Okay, the second fly is the one that I tied for Haig Brown on Wednesday. I figured, seeing as I had all the materials out ready to go with it, I'll just do a quickie little shuffle here and show you how to tie this one. Now, the hook for that was, like I say, a Tiemco 200R, and I have a box of them in different sizes. If you ever find these little boxes, grab them because they're great for storing hook. So it's the same kind of hook, except this one is a size. This one's a Daiichi, and it's a size 10. And for the cowichan, apparently that's about the size of the nymphs, the stoneflies that you find on the cowichan. If you're tying these for the Bow River, forget it. You need a lot bigger hook because they're a lot bigger fly. So this is what it looks like. It's called a simple stonefly. So once again, the hook is this Daiichi. It's, what's the number here? 1273. It's basically the Daiichi equivalent of the 200R. And Brian was kind enough to pick these up for me at Teddy's. And what I like about them is they're red. I think sometimes a little bit of red in a fly is a bit of a strike trigger. And when this fly is done, the butt end and the front end of the fly will be a nice red color. Okay, so this is the stonefly. Now, stoneflies are found nymphs on the bottom. Right. Fell on the floor and rolled away from me. So I need to weight it down, and this is actual lead wire. I have a supply of that I've had for years. It came in a Spirit River dispenser with 2, 4, 6 different sizes of lead wire. And it came enough that I've got a lifetime supply there.
What color bead is that, Dave?
That's a black. That's that same bead as I used on the Chronomet. It's a flat black firehole bead. It's a 3 millimeter for this size of hook. It fits overnight. It goes because it's a proper fly tying bead. It has the bigger back end as opposed to the front end. So you push that small front end right up to the eye of the hook. It doesn't cover the eye. Now with the wire, one of the things I discovered in watching a video on this guy was if you tying wire on, I always have trouble with holding the tag end. So what the guy did is he got one of these what they call test clips and grabs the lead with the test clip, starts right at the point, and then you wrap touching turns all the way up the shank of the hook. Now, because you're holding that tag end with the test clip, the wire doesn't have a tendency to spin around, the butt end doesn't have a tendency to spin around the hook. And so you get it all the way up to just behind the eye. Then I undo the back end and take the tag end of the lead wire, and with my fingertip, I will wrap that, or my scissor tip, I'll wrap that last little tag end of lead around the hook shank. Nice and snug. And I want the lead to go back till it's right over where the barb was. So once it's over where the barb is, I can finish the wraps up right behind the bead. At that point, I can use my scissors to trim off the lead and tuck the lead right into the back of the bead. So the whole body of the fly is now covered in lead. Just get that tag end of lead right behind. Now, this technique probably works even better with if you're using the lead-free wire, because it holds the lead-free wire close enough to the hook that you're not going to have trouble getting in there with your scissors to trim it off. And there we go. So, tail. Back into the fly. The first thing I need is thread, and I've picked a relatively bright yellow thread. You can use a lighter yellow thread. But I start right behind the eye of the hook, the bead, and I have to loosen up my tension. Yep. Just loosen the tension on my bobbin there, was a little bit tight. Now I want to wrap over the lead all the way down the hook shank. Come off the tag. And I'm going to do that completely back up and forth to make sure that lead wire is not going anywhere. It's not going to spin around. When I get the lead wire, the thread back to the back end of the hook, I'm going to take my fly tying pliers, which are a pair of actually electronic pliers that have no serrations on them. They have a flat blade. And what I'm going to do with them is go across the fly, the lead, and squish it down flat. And the purpose of that is to give the body of the fly eventually a bit of an oval appearance. So you see that it's skinny on the side and flat on the top. Now, the body of this fly is dubbing, and I have two kinds. I have a Traveler's Antron dubbing that has a golden stone color, and I have a Awesome Possum, which is something like an SLF dubbing. It's got a little more spiky. And the Antron is quite fine, which means that when you spin it on the thread, it's going to make a nice compact dubbing rope. So at very first, I just want a little bit of dubbing on the thread. You see, I'm making a little bit of a dubbing rope here with my fingers, just spinning it on. And because it's fine Antron, it will make a really nice tight rope. And this is right at the back end of the fly. I'm going to wrap right behind the lead, and I'm going to wrap enough dubbing rope on to build just a little bit of a dubbing ball that's a little bit thicker than the lead, right where the lead ends. So you see there's a little bit of a bump there. Now I need the tails. The tails are either brown, or I've got some bright, I want this fly to be fairly bright. Well, on the cowichan, you'd probably use a darker colored thread and the darker colored biots, because they're a little darker Yeah, but I'm tying them here so you can see them nice. This is a goose biot. And with the goose biot, I'm going to tear this right off the stem. And I always do that because there's this little notch you can see here in the biot, right when you tear it off, there's this little notch. And if you're ever going to use a biot for making a ribbed body on a fly, you need to know where that notch is, because that determines if you tie it on with the notch up or the notch down, it determines whether you get a smooth or a ribbed body with the biot. I don't need that for this fly, so I'm going to cut the notch off. Just the notch part. Biot, of course, has a natural curve to it. I want the curve facing down. The tip is going to the back. I'll measure the length of the biots so that they're about shank length behind the fly. I'm going to hold it at about a 45-degree angle across the top of the fly and hold it down with my thumb nail and make a wrap over the biot. And because it's at a 45-degree angle, as I make these wraps up the biot, it'll force the biot on the side of the hook to help enhance that flat appearance. Take my thread back to the back again. And do the same thing with the next biot off the stem. Trim the notch out. And I told the guys at Haig Brown that I'm going to do a clink hammer for them, and I'll show them how to do a biot body. Again, curve down. I match the length up as best I can.
Dennis?
And use my finger to hold it in place and wrap over the biot. And that will also force that bit of biot down on the side. So now I've got that nice split in the biots off the back of the body. Bring my thread up to the front. And then I need this stuff, which is pheasant tail. And I happen to have one that's dyed kind of a greenish color. And it's a long pheasant tail. And the longer, the better for this guy. I'm gonna pick, I pick a set of pheasant tail fibers that are about the gap of the hook, maybe slightly less than the gap. Hold them out at right angles to the stem and trim them off. Now, of course, these pheasant tails, that when they're connected together like that, they have a dark side and a bright side. And the dark side I want to fold over on the top. So I'm going to tie it in by the light side down. Go back here and catch them in on top of the hook and just wrap over them back towards the tag end of the hook. That's because these biots are nice and long. And this again helps build the bulk of the body. And bring the thread up front again. And I have some fine copper wire. Where is it here? There it is. Sorry, not the copper wire. I'm using a gold wire. This is a little thicker wire than the other one. This one is a fairly brittle wire, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to helicopter it off when I want to tie it off. Put the wire at the front right behind the bead. And I'm going to, again, wrap this so that, oops, it came off. I want to wrap the wire on so that as I wrap it down the keep pulling it out. There we go. Not on the top of the hook. I've finished off with the pheasant tail. Going back to my dubbing box, this is the fine Amtron again. And what I want to do with this is, but fatter body than what I did with the first batch of dubbing. So you can see it's a much chunkier dubbing rope. Try and start it at the back, a little skinnier than up the middle. So it wouldn't hurt to have slightly tapered dubbing rope. And then wrap from the back to the front. And I can overlap these wraps a little bit to slowly build a minor slight taper to the body of the Stonefly. And I keep, you see me keep giving it a little twist, clockwise twist as I go forward. That helps make sure the body is nice and tight. Now I stop putting the thorax, sorry, the abdomen halfway up the hook shank. Then I take the pheasant tail, pull it directly over the top, and hold it nice and snug down on the top of the hook. Make a couple of wraps to bind it down. Then a wrap in front, just to cinch it in. The rib is with the wire. I go under the hook, and I make wraps fairly close together here for the abdomen of this fly. I want a good 4 or 5 wraps up the abdomen. There's 3, 4, and then I'm going to lift this up and wrap the wire in front and tie it off right in front of where I had that pheasant tail sticking. And as I said, I think I'm going to have a problem with this wire helicoptering it off because it's not ductile like the other stuff I used. And I come in with, I've got a part on these scissors at the bottom that are designed for clipping wire. Get that wire out of the way. I'm going to pull the pheasant tail back a little bit, make a wrap or so to get right, pull it so that it's going right back from where it was tied in. Then I switched dubbing. This is the SLS stuff. It's golden stone as well, or the Boston possum. And you'll see that this this is a lot spikier dubbing. It has longer, more coarse fibers in it. And I'm going to make a fairly thick rope of this stuff. I don't want to multi-wrap it. I want to make a fewer wraps than what you would think. I only need to do a little bit on the thread here. I'm going to wrap back over top of that pheasant tail a little bit. And I'm going to make a good chunky thorax here that's close to double the thickness of the abdomen. And I want to go halfway towards the eye of the hook. Pull the pheasant tail forward. And this way, I'm going to put my thumb on top of this, on both the back and the front, to try and spread those fibers out a little bit. You can see make them as flat out as I can. Couple of wraps, pull it back,
Wrap in front.
and wrap over top of it a little bit. Again, towards the back. And then another batch of this awesome dubbing. which is, I think, initially a Kiwi product. And I like it, the fact that it's pretty spiky. It's making not too many wraps. So it's nice and fuzzy. Once again, pull that stuff forward and wrap over top the pheasant tail. Wrap in front of it, right behind the bead. And trim it off. So you end up with 2 wing pads right behind the bead. Now that one kind of got covered over a little. The general idea is to have that there. There's my wood finisher. I'm not quite finished yet. So I go in here with my scissors and I trim off anything that's sticking up to the top. And turn it upside down and trim off anything that's sticking to the bottom. I get my little popsicle stick dubbing roughener and wrap it out from the bottom to the sides, just off the bottom. Loosen that dubbing up a bit. And take my dubbing needle and I go in on the side with the needle on the side of the fly, right at the thorax, and I'll pull out some of those bits of dubbing. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Right there. Be careful when you do this. Don't catch the deer, the pheasant tail, or you'll split it up. So you see now I got some fuzz sticking out both sides of this thing. Those are the legs. And I'll take my scissors and I'll trim them off at a nice angle or a nice length. So they're nice, still stay fuzzy, but they don't stick out too far. And the last thing I do is I take my Sally Hansen's hard nails and I'll just put a little dab of glue on the front 2 bits of the wing pads, not all the way back, just on the front 2, to add a little bit of a glisten to that. And as the glue settles in there, it tends to make those bristles that stick up to the side a little stiffer. And that's him. That's your simple stonefly. There we go.
Very nice.
So now it's Florence's turn.
Thank you.
Maybe you
Oh, a
get
quick
my
question.
highlight off here.
A quick question before Flores starts. Dave,
Sure.
you were mentioning that on the couch and you'd use darker biots. Would you use a darker body
Yep.
overall?
I'd use a slightly darker body, sort of a brownish, more of a brownish color, probably something like that.
Okay.
And again, a fine light brown at the back and maybe a little darker on the thorax.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, it's a fine dubbing for the back and then that spikier dubbing at the front, which is what gives it so what it does is if you tie a conventional stonefly nymph you'll end up with biots at the front, the biots at the back, some sort of wing pads that you're going to tie in on the back of the fly, ribbing, and then legs, rubber legs. Well, that's a very complicated fly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like this simple version. I think it will work just as well as the complicated version, and a little easier to tie.
But as the adage goes, the flies that we tie are for ourselves, not for the fish.
Yes. that one is an easy one, and the fish. They, what was it? Somebody said when you're tying things like tricots that have 3 tails, those are little wee black nymphs that are mayflies, that sort of fly that has 3 tails. Well, I remember one of the famous fly guys that I talked to said, he was an entomologist, and he said, trout can't count. So why do you put 3 tails on?
They go to school, but they really haven't learned much.
I like that. They go to school, but they didn't learn how to count. I like that.
I don't know if they did he provide any evidence for that?
I'm trying to think. I think
As a biologist, he should have referenced some article on that.
I think it was Gary LaFontaine that's. Hey, we got the January thing. Gary was a really nice guy. He died of ALS, I think. So Florence on.
Thank you, Dave. All right. Well, the vice of the week this week is, surprise, surprise, the Dyna King.
There we go.
At some point, I broke down, and it was before they doubled the prices on everything, so I didn't quite break the bank. And got a Dyna King Professional Vice, which is the non-rotary, right? So it's kind of their top of the line because it has the most level of adjustments in terms of angles and whatnot, and of course the jaws do rotate. And this is a very nice vise for tying both tiny little flies. The jaws hold down to as small as I care to go, and also for bigger hooks like this thing, which is actually a size 8 nymph hook, like a 9671 Mustad. Actually, this one.
Are the jaws grooved, Florin?
The jaws are grooved 2 ways. You can see here, maybe in the picture, a little bit of a groove that goes the length of the jaws, very fine grooves. And then if you turn the jaws like this, it also has grooves to accommodate bigger hooks. And so they're grooved in 2 directions. They're quite something, and they're holding hooks very well, and the closing mechanism is quite a pleasure to use. It's just as the simple lever stuff, a cam lever, but once you put the hook in there, it's good. All right. And the only thing I don't like about this vise is it doesn't have that sort of large area to rest your left hand as the Regal does. But any of all these vices of this type that are kind of derived from the granddaddy of them all, the old Thompsons, this is probably the best. Mohammed, you had a question?
I was just going to ask you, like, over the year, will you be using a different vice every week? Will we get to see all your like 52 different vices?
I don't have 52 different vices, so it's not
Yeah.
gonna get there. I'm getting close to the bottom of the pile. I have maybe another 1 or 2 vices to show, but that's it. Right, but the main vices I'm tying on, you've already seen the Norvice, the Dyna King, and the Rego. These are the main ones I'm using. And I change depending on you know the type of fly that I do. So for example, the fly I'm doing today might be a lot easier to do on the Norvice because this is the kind of thing that lends itself very well
Who's
to
keep
rotary
calling
tying.
us on their phone?
I'm sorry?
Oh.
Okay, I think that was just somebody talking to someone else. All right, so hook and then the bead is a 530 seconds tungsten bead that came out. I don't know. I have somewhere a bag with them on the desk, but it's basically the fluorescent yellow or chartreuse version of these ones. So I have them in green. I have some in orange and some in pink as well, and they all came from Trout Bum. So yeah, that's the one. And the reason I thought of the Vampire Leech was because of Dave Cook's blue flies last week that were using the same bead. I thought, you know, this is the standard material for the Vampire Leech. So let's do some Vampire Leeches. And so this is what it is. It's really just a woolly bugger with a few materials substituted here and there. But otherwise it is essentially a woolly bugger. So I'm using some thread that's a little thicker. This is a fairly large hook. So this is a 3/0 uni thread. And then for the tail, I'm just going to grab some fibers off a marabou plume. And this is way too long, but I'm going to trim them off. So I might need a little bit more to add to this bunch. You just take your plume and you just rip off fibers off the side. Nothing different from your standard woolly bugger production. Okay, so attach these, and if you don't want to mess with this fluff, you just kind of give it a cut across here. That's pretty thick. Okay, so measure and attach to the hook shank, and then just quickly spiral off your thread through it. It's going to secure it perfectly. Now, trick that's used to keep your tails from getting fouled in the hook is to put a couple of wraps of thread behind and underneath the tail. Some people like long tails, some people like short tails. I'm more of a short tail kind of guy. Just pinch to the desired length and leave it well alone. The next material for these types of fly that's useful is this UV Pearl Super Flash. It's very fine, and it's got bit of a yellowish tint in one direction, and then bluish flashes as you turn it. And the challenge with this thing is that in the right light, it becomes invisible. And so it's a bit of a pain to work with because of that. So you grab one strand and then hold it against the light, whichever way you can, in order to get to see it. And then what I'm doing is I'm folding these strands between my fingers So I fold it twice. So I end up with 4 strands. They're of approximately equal length. And I have a bundle of 4 strands. Now what I do with these is the following. I take them and tie on one side of the hook. So let's say I start on the near side of the hook that's facing me. And go to the end of the tail. So that's going to be there. Now I pull the remaining 4 strands, and this is long enough that I can do this. I swing them under the hook, and I hold them on the other side of the hook. So now I have a few strands of this flashy material on either side of the tail. And the only thing that I still want to do at this point is make sure that I don't have any extra long strands. So just trim them off before I proceed with the rest of the fly. And now at this point, it's essentially a choice of what do you want to do for the body. The sort of standard recipe for the vampire leech that I found seems to call for this polar chenille, which looks like this. It's basically a black chenille with some bluish bits of sparkle. It comes in very long version, and you can get it. It's essentially the same thing, but a lot denser like this. Or you can use a dubbing brush, where I used here, I didn't, oh no, I did bring it. You can use Semi-Seal. This black blue is going to give you the right effect. And you can also go and watch Phil Rowley do some nice leeches with this black blue Semi-Seal. Very nice stuff. So here are some of the differences of shapes that you get. So if you use the Semi-Seal, you get this fairly streamlined leech. If you use that denser chenille, you can get a fat body like this. And if you use the really long straggly stuff, you get something that's wild like this, and actually does need a haircut. Okay. So let me go with the long chenille, which is kind of very long for this size of fly, and see how that goes. Just attach your chenille at the back and wrap the thread forward to right behind the eye, and then start wrapping and folding those fibers back as well as you can. So just use your other hand to basically preen these fibers back so they don't all clump together in the front like this. And here at the very front behind the bead, you may want to do another turn or two, just the same way. So you wrap this stuff the same way you'd be wrapping a hackle, really. That's all there is to it. Okay, so now I think I got the thing the way I wanted it to be. Give it 2 good solid turns over the chenille, and then a couple more turns in front and right. Let the thread sink right behind that bead. Okay. When you're at this stage, just fill in that gap there. That's going to super secure your chenille. Nothing's gonna go anywhere. And a couple of whip finishes, and you're done. Okay, now a few more things you can do. You can take these fibers and kind of turn them between your fingers to have them. You can also dunk this in warm water and shape the body that way a little bit. You can also use an old toothbrush. The stiffer the bristles, the better. If your dentist ever gives you a toothbrush that's too stiff, don't use it on yourself. Use it on the flies. And the other thing you can do is, if you're unhappy with the shape of the whole thing, or these fibers are way too long, just take your scissors and boldly cut. To whatever shape you find most pleasing to the eye. As Mohammed said very well, we're not tying for the fish, we're tying for ourselves. And we occasionally do catch fish. But yeah. And that's it. It's basically just I don't know, this used to be called an egg sucking leech, whatever. So I guess the thing that makes it a vampire leech is this kind of glowy yellow chartreuse thing. I've never seen a vampire this color, so I don't know why. Anyway, I'm from Romania, so I should know about vampires. All right, done. This is the fly, and then just vary materials and colors and whatever, and take it out there and see what happens.
Good, good.
I even did one with a two-tone body here, because I had some leftover dubbing brushes. Have fun.
That was good, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Now I understand that there is a back to the in-person activities. Are we?
Yeah, we're hoping to get back the 1st of March, so it won't happen. 1st of March is in 2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we going to do once a month online fly tying, or what's the? Have you guys thought about that?
Haven't discussed it much.
Personally,
because that's
we get a better turnout when we have it on Zoom.
Yeah.
Ironically.
But I guess you've got all your materials with you and so on.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, for some people who are a distance away from where you may hold it, they don't want to necessarily travel. So certainly doing it by Zoom is great. I mean, my personal opinion, I think if we do it twice a month by Zoom and twice a month in person, that would be a good balance.
Yeah, I think that too. I think that's a good mix.
Yeah.
Because when we do it in person, we can simply just, guys can come and tie the patterns they want. But if we do the Zoom ones, then generally somebody has to do some prep work. And I think, twice a month, I wouldn't mind being able to do the prep work a couple of times a month.
Yep.
Then
I thought we were considering doing both, so that if we had an in-person, we would also have the Zoom working there, because that's what we're planning to do for our meetings, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll take
So-
a week or so for us to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah,
properly.
I think we're probably gonna have to get some type of device, but yeah,
Well, actually, I figure we'll need two computers or two iPads or something at the meeting, one to face the group and one to face the chairs so that people can see what's going on. And see the crowd.
Yeah, well, we have a projector. If we have if we can get it set up a screen, we have a projector that connects to a computer. You could go on the computer. You could go to the Zoom webpage and blank off the camera on the computer and just use it to project the window onto the screen.
Yeah,
And then you need whoever's going to be doing the demo would have to have like an iPad that you would do to log into the system.
yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
we'll need to play with that, I suspect.
Yeah, well, I figured it'd take us a couple of times before we perfect it,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I know
It's a
when-
little more difficult than doing straight Zoom or, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know when I
Anyway.
was in Ottawa.
Well, thanks, Dave and
Yeah. That's
Florian?
okay.
When I was in Ottawa with the club there, when we used to do all of them were in-person sessions, but we used to actually have, so we usually someone tied a demo fly for each night, one or two, and we'd actually have it projected onto a screen so that people can sit where they are and still see a large image of what's going on.
Yeah, we do the same thing here when we are in person. We just have a projector and we use it to project on the wall because otherwise, it's there are too many of us and we would have to sit too close and it just
Yeah.
doesn't work. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we can play around with it the first regular club meeting to see how we can make that work.
Yeah,
I
sure,
think
that sounds good.
first couple of meetings. And in the meantime, we'll continue to do these on Saturday mornings until we sort out the technology. We'll keep doing them Saturday morning. And then once we
Sounds
sort
good.
the technology out, maybe, alternate weeks kind of thing.
yeah.
Yep, that sounds
So
good.
Tuesday, we'll discuss when we actually go back, whether it will be March the 1st or the following week, so.
Yeah, good.
Anyways, I gotta go.
right.
Thanks,
Me
Lauren
too.
and Dave.
Thanks once again,
Right.
guys.
Right.
Thanks to
Okay,
both.
so we prepare some flies for next weekend.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I have, Lauren, I'll talk to you about a couple of possibilities.
Okay,
Cheers, guys.
okay,
Thank you.
take care.
See you guys.
Bye.
Enjoy the sunshine.
Well, we've got sort of hazy sunshine and rain here in Souk, so
Give me a break. Well, I'm having kind of hazy weather and it's supposed to rain today as well. It's like it's February. We're supposed to have snow. It's
Skiing's done.
insane. It's insane. Anyway,
oh,
Hey,
and
So, Florence-
I hope you don't mind my ribbing you about your vices.
no, not at all. Not at all. Actually, I'm getting the itch now. It's like I haven't bought a vice in a while, and I'm looking at several. There's several things that have caught my eye, and I don't know which one. There is a German one, which is the German response to the Norvice, and that one I probably need to ask assistance from my family to navigate the German language requirements, because you can't even order it straight from the shop. You'd have to, if you're in Germany, you can, but if you're not, you have to. They have a deal. They have a sports shop that does the exporting, because I guess it's VAT and whatever stuff, right? So there is that. Then Stonefly makes some interesting stuff. That's the Italian.
That's right.
These are the Italian guys. Then I've always been tempted by the midge jaws. for the Dyna King, and I wish I'd bought them first time I thought about it because the price has just gone silly on them.
Talking silly prices, I saw an advertisement, I forget where I saw it, for some Italian-made vise that was in the thousands. Not 1,000,
yeah, well,
multiple
those-
thousands.
Oh yeah, and what's it? What are the other guys? HMH
Yeah,
are making sort of it's a little bit like the Waldron Vice along those ideas, and it's again it's expensive. Oh, Tiemco has a high-end Vice that here in North America they want an arm and a leg, but I think you can order it from Japan and it's much more reasonably priced.
Dave, you can stop the recording.
oh yeah, better do that, yeah, it'll run over.
Yeah, or delete this stuff and so you turn it back.